What's going on, everybody? Non here, and I want to talk a little bit about private equity and Pokemon. And for those of you who haven't seen, there was a large sale of a sports card. Set a record. It was a Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant on card auto, I believe, with patches of each player's jersey, which is like the top of what collectors slash investors want in the sports card market. And I guess Kevin O'Leary, dude from Shark Tank, CNBC, um, partially legit, partially snake oil salesman, was talking about how collectibles are big and blah 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 blah. And this sparked a lot of YouTubers saying, "Hey, look, this is vindication that there's a lot of potential investment coming into the Pokemon space, specifically, TCGs, collectibles in general." And I'm here to pump the brakes on that a little bit. Most of you probably don't know, I am a financial professional in my actual job. I've spent an awful lot of time working with private equity, probably more than I have cared to. So there's a bunch of different challenges here, and I have the Pokemon destruction tracker here because I want to have a conversation about total addressable market. And this will give you guys a fun data point because right now it's sort of unpacked in the last 30 days to take a look at on screen as I'm talking about this. So the first thing is these investment firms, even though the collectible market is unregulated, most investment firms are regulated. So they have certain filings they have to do. There's certain requirements. You have charters where you can't put more. I'll just give you some general tips, and a lot of these they're just super specific. So I'll just give you some general terms. People have to be able to get liquidity. So if you put money in, you want money back, you have to give them their money back. Now you have closed-end funds in the market, but most of the closed-end funds are actually registered securities. Now you have your own challenge with a non-regulated market and a regulated entity buying into this, and it creates some issues there. So your traditional hedge fund can't really invest in this stuff because of regulation. So you cut that back, you're looking if they're dealing with other people's money, there's certain requirements for liquidity. If they're only dealing with their own money, those are the sort of firms, really family offices, one-person shops, where they can effectively do whatever they want because they're not managing other people's money. They're not beholden to any sort of regulation whatsoever. Quite honestly, they can invest in whatever they want. So if we narrow it down to that small little corner of the investment space, now you have to look at the benefit, right? So they need to be able to put enough money to work. And that's part of the reason why I had this up. So if you look at Evolving Skies, and this is the total estimated packs that are open based on, this is just the total population that's graded with PSA, the hit rate, etc. And I believe 1 in 1,888 is approximately where it's at. Nobody really knows. But in 603,000 packs, yes, you can buy packs, you can buy boxes today, but you can't accumulate a massive volume of product today. It can't be done. You can buy maybe 25 cases, 35 cases, but these investment funds want to put, even the small family office, their minimum buy is going to be $5 million if they're tiny, but you're talking 25, 50, $250 million for it just to be a small percentage of the overall wealth of these small family offices. You can't do it in Pokemon. Even if they were to come in and say, Mega Evolutions, they go to each distributor, they work a backdoor deal, they get 10,000 booster boxes, right? And most of the large distributors, that's probably about 10% of what they're getting in total of booster boxes. 10,000 booster boxes at $90 is, what is that, $4 million across the four majors? Maybe, that you're putting to work. not a huge dollar amount. Um, and that's 10,000 boxes, so call it 40,000 boxes in total. So you're going through all this headache to quite honestly do something that you probably can't do in practicality anyway, to put $4 million for work, and then you have to do this again and again and again, set after set. And the problem becomes is you have no liquidity. Now, if it's just a small portion of your assets and it's sitting there for an undefined amount of time because you have permanent capital, it's yours. You don't have investors, you don't have any debt on this. Part of the other challenge is you can't lever this up because you don't have an asset that provides cash flow. Therefore, it is not financeable. Now, if you had a pile of cash that was sitting in the bank, you could use that as collateral to borrow on this, but you can't pay 6 or 7 or 8% interest on this because there's no cash flows to cover it. You're just eroding the overall value. And as we've seen with Pokemon, it's not a straight hockey stick. You have chunk plays where it'll move up and it'll do nothing for 2 years. It'll move up, it'll do nothing for 2 years. So hypothetically, we figure all this stuff out and somebody is able to accumulate this when the sets come out, which is quite honestly the only time anybody's going to be able to accumulate enough to the point where it matters. And even then, you're talking about the smallest of the small firms. Then it comes time to sell. So if I'm sitting on 40,000 booster boxes and I want to liquidate a material amount, where the fuck am I going to sell it? Am I going to sell it at auction? Am I going to sell it on privately back to the distributors and have them move it out to everybody? You could do that. That is certainly an option that would be workable. But the amount of time and effort to gain liquidity into that, and it's probably a best effort deal with the distributors, and you have to find somebody who's going to want to do it at the point where the market's reasonably hot. You drop 40,000 boxes into a market for something that's selling at $500 a box, it's going to have an impact on the market. You're basically impairing your own value when you're doing that because as supply dries up and the price of products move up, it becomes more and more elastic when more product comes to market, which is, we've seen this with reprints in the past. And reprints in the past, I mean, that is a super liquid environment. I'm talking well after rotation where the liquidity has really started to dry up in these products, like we're seeing right now with the Sword and Shield, with your with your Lost Origin, your Fusion Strike. Imagine Fusion Strike if somebody came out and said, I have 40,000 boxes to sell in the market. You couldn't sell them. There's just not enough demand. Now, everybody listening, all the PokeTubers would be like, I'd buy as many as I could at $150 a box. Well, you're not going to get them for $150 a box because nobody's going to sell it for that level of discount. And quite honestly, maybe you can buy 100 boxes, 200 boxes, 1,000 boxes. But if somebody's trying to move 40,000, it's just not going to happen in a practical manner. The amount of labor and time that would have to be spent is just not practical because the liquidity isn't there. So now you have multiple challenges. You have no cash flows from the asset. It is virtually impossible to accumulate enough value at the point in time when you want to buy in. This would have to be something that you're buying in over a 2 to 3 year period, which you certainly do, but you also have to have the discipline to put together a multi-year thesis and stick to it, right? Through the good and the bad. There's no liquidity to sell the product if you're able to accumulate at scale, unless you take a fairly significant discount or you somehow manage to push it through multiple distributors and kind of backdoor it into the market where you've gotten paid for it. Again, you're taking a fairly sizable discount. And then 3, you're limited because if you have an investment vehicle that's buying Pokemon, you can never get to the point where you're legitimate. And by legitimate, I mean soliciting outside investors, taking OPM, other people's money. So at the current size, and again, let's look at Evolving Skies. So 603 million packs estimated that have been ripped. That's basically the population times the hit rate, and this is assuming like 10% of the cards are graded. It could be more than this, it could be less than this, but let's just assume the original cost on this is probably sub $3 a pack. So if somebody were to acquire all of this the date of release, which is obviously this was reprinted over multiple years, you're talking $1.8 billion of market cap. Now, that's something that could potentially happen, but a lot of these packs, they're in tins, they're in EX boxes, they're in they're in trainer toolkits, they're in calendars, they're all over the freaking place. There aren't enough booster boxes for folks to buy. Now, in addition, you have to store the product. So now you're paying a monthly fee that is eroding the value of the asset because you have to pay to store it at scale, multiple pallets and pallets and pallets. And it's certainly something you do. Security, all of those things. You have the funds tied up. If you need to use those funds as collateral, nobody's going to lend you on Pokemon cards. Nobody's going to get comfortable with the value because people are going to laugh at you the way the world currently is today. Now, in 5 years, could be a completely different situation. No different than 5 years ago. If you told somebody you were into Pokemon, they'd be like, nerd. Now you tell somebody that you're into Pokemon, they're like, oh, great. How much is it worth? How much did you make? That's kind of cool. In 5 years, it could be, that's amazing. Show me the way. Who knows? But those are all limiting reasons as to why we need to slow roll a little bit. And, BlackRock isn't coming out and buying all the PSA 10 Moonbrons anytime soon. They're going to buy all the apartment complexes and, jack up the rent and become slumlords. But I don't see a scenario where it happens here anytime soon. Now, again, that doesn't mean that there aren't a bunch of high net worth individuals, which we already know that is the case because, there's tens of thousands of them buying this stuff with crypto dollars and whatever because they like it. But I don't see a world where we currently are today with the tiny, tiny numbers in the total addressable market of these things at the point in time where volume can be accumulated for it to ever make sense to an investment firm. And every day that goes by with the inflation of the US dollar, that disparity becomes wider and wider. Now, with that over with, let's take a look at what's been ripped. So last 30 days. Prismatic evolutions. Obviously, this is the granddaddy. What's crazy is 3.3 million boxes have been ripped. Now, this is only cards that have been registered at PSA. So this is probably a 45 to 60 day lag because of everything that's in process. So there are so many Prismatic Evolutions packs out there, it would absolutely blow your freaking mind. And the fact that the price is still holding up, it's just remarkable. It's either a testament to the strength of the market or a testament to how stupid people are because they've been overpaying for Prismatic because they don't understand how much is out there. My guess it's probably a mix of both because I've been buying some Prismatic at cheap prices, and but I know there's a lot out there. Evolving, still number 2. 151, number 3. Surging, Journey Together. Here, this is obviously a very, very healthy number of packs. Obviously coming on the back of the release of the set. Because the set was March, so now we have effectively a full, what we would call, look at the last 30 days of returns from PSA. Crown Zenith, 9600 Silver Tempest, 9.4, Paldean Fates, 9.2, which again is these numbers are crazy. Greninja, and again, these are the number of packs in the last 30 days from cards that have been graded. And again, if this is 2 months old, we're looking at stuff that was submitted in June. Brilliant Stars, Destined, now 7 million packs here. Destined came out, was actually a little bit later in June. So maybe these are probably expedited. It's probably more than this. Paldea Evolved. And then you get into Paldea, Obsidian Flames Lost Origin. temporal, and some of the other stuff here. So it's interesting because if we look at the total equivalent boxes open, we're looking at some absolutely crazy numbers. Let's go the other way. Evolving Skies, 16.7 million estimated booster box equivalent. So again, that's just 30 total number of packs divided by 36. Brilliant Stars 8.8, Silver Tempest 7.5. Then you go all the way back to Crown Zenith at 6.2. Then Lost Origin 4.5. Surging 4.9. So what's interesting here is outside of Brilliant and Silver Tempest, you have a bunch of Sword and Shield sets that really don't have a whole lot showing up here. I think what's interesting is 151 is down. Paldean Fates is right behind it, which is amazing because 151 has been reprinted so much more than Paldean Fates, but people are grading the Bubble Mew at a much higher rate than what they're grading the Charizard. Then Twilight Shining Fates, and then this prismatic number, I would be shocked if it doesn't pass Evolving Skies at some point in time. It's absolutely crazy how much is out here. But anyway, I want to talk a little bit about some of the limitations with private equity and how investment funds, they're very limited with what they can and can't do here. And I know it's not the core competence of a lot of folks talking about Pokemon. So I wanted to talk through just for a little bit of an education as to, let's not get too excited because there's a lot of reasons why it's not going to happen in the current market. So anyway, guys, like the video, subscribe, join the Discord. We'll talk soon.